Hi and welcome to the My Future Business Show. My name's Rick Nusky, and today I have the greatest of pleasures talking with Dr. LindaJoy. How are you? LJ, as we're probably going to call you throughout the call. Is that okay?
That is fine. That is what people usually do,
Excellent.
And I'm very well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, look, I've seen through your long list of interviews, and you actually write for the Huffington Post, and that really caught my attention because the Huffington Post is clearly, not a runner-up. They're the leader in this field, and you talk a lot about the healthy living and things like GPS and soul verticals. Now, we've got a couple of places that we're likely to go on this call today, but can we start there about this healthy living, GPS and soul verticals? Are they related?
Well, I think GPS for the soul is a little bit more toward the spiritual side. Mm-hmm. And so when I started writing, my actual audition piece was I had started out by publishing an article. I don't know if you remember and followed this case. This was about 3 years ago. There was a beautiful young woman who had moved to Oregon so that she could legally commit suicide by taking the drug. She had a brain glioblastoma, mm-hmm. and she did not want to continue cycling down. So she made that choice, and it became kind of a big issue here in the United States about that choice to end your life. Mm-hmm. And at the time when she passed away, within a couple days, my father-in-law, who was so precious to me, passed away. And so I wrote an article, and one of my friends and colleagues saw that article, and she writes for Huffington Post, and she wrote to them, and she said, I really believe that this woman needs to be writing for you. And the editor said, I like this, but by the time I wrote the article, they were a week past her assisted suicide. And so she said, we're past the news cycle. Would you consider writing an audition piece for us? And so I decided to take really the crux of that, which was about mindful reverence. And so when you get into a subject about mindfulness, they would put that that's where that wound up in the GPS for the soul vertical. And then when I write about the difference between doing green smoothies and juicing, which is kind of another hat that I wear in the holistic health side of things, then they put that in the healthy living. Sometimes they just put my recipes in the food section too.
Well, it seems to me that, the things that pop to mind as business owners for in our particular case, they seem to, not all, divorce the need for health and well-being and wellness and looking after their spirituality. They tend to separate these things and be full on, spending long hours each day focusing on the business, but actually somewhat neglecting that side of their life. Is this a pattern that you've seen?
Well, I have my own experience with that where I wasn't as focused, let's say, on business, although I've been a businesswoman, self-employed since my mid-20s, and I'm now in my 60s. So it's been a long time that I've relied on working for myself, but I was more kind of like a talking head. I thought I was very spiritual, and I was a very mentally oriented person because of being a psychologist, doing hypnotherapy, being trained in Jungian psychoanalysis. And so I finally found myself to be a talking head, very disconnected from my body, and wound up in a situation where I had a serious autoimmune disorder. So it was a matter of really life or death that I had to discover that I had a body.
Wow.
and start taking care of it. And so I kind of tend to reinvent myself like every 7 to 10 years. And I always come back to the mind, but at that time I became very focused on the body. And that's what led me then into the Natural Wellness Academy. So it's been this kind of continuous journey.
Look, the stories behind the people behind the things they do is one of the themes that My Future Business looks at, because it's fine and dandy to look at the nuts and bolts of running business, but it's also of interest to me in particular and obviously our audience in turn. We get some great feedback about learning about the people behind the business rather than just looking at the nuts and bolts, like I mentioned. So thank you for that. I wonder if we can share with our audience, where are you, in fact?
I live in Tampa, Florida. I'm from Chicago originally, but I lived in Southern California for about 30 years. And I never felt like that was home, but for about 13 of them, my morning commute was Tokyo. Oh, wow. And then I'd go on to, I never made it to Australia, but I was in Southeast Asia a lot, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Thailand and other places. And so I kind of suspected one day I would wind up in Florida, but I only knew at that point the east coast of Florida. I used to do a lot of TV kind of in the Miami area. Right. But this is on the west coast, the Gulf side of Florida, and I became acquainted through my husband's family having a place here. So it's mellower than the east coast of Florida.
Okay, so I often, there's something recently that became apparent to me is this question of, does your environment, the place that you exist and live, have an effect on your wellness?
Well, I think it does. I mean, I think that even ascertaining whether it resonates to you is important. As much as people love Southern California, and I was right there in the OC, I was in Newport Beach and then San Clemente, I just didn't feel like it was home. It didn't resonate to me at a certain level. And people always joke about the humidity of Florida, and I joke that I'm like one of the 10 people in the world that love humidity. So in many ways, I blossomed here, but in many ways, I think I faced some of my worst shadow traits and had to kind of find myself here more than anything else. So I think it works both ways. We're challenged when we pick up and move to a new place because we have to meet new people and kind of start all over.
Well, there are just so many great things that we could talk about with our audience here. And one of the things that really captures my attention and about your background is that you have a PhD. Could you tell us a little bit about that and where you studied?
Well, I studied, I was starting to do my undergraduate work when I was still in Chicago, and then I moved to California, and I did some work at UCLA, my graduate in communications. And then I decided to do a PhD, and I kind of did this joint program with the Union Institute, and a lot of it was pre-online education. You did a lot of work. You had somebody that was a mentor, and you had kind of like a learning crew. And I was planning to be a Jungian, or Carl Jung, sometimes pronounced Jung, psychoanalyst. And at the time, which was back in the late 80s when I was finishing up my PhD, you had to go on another 10 years to be a psychoanalyst. Wow. And I became really interested in the field of hypnotherapy. My mother was at the time dying, and I had heard about a weekend workshop to work with cancer patients. So I thought, this is interesting. Maybe I can help Mom. And I became so fascinated because if you go through psychoanalysis, I don't know if you know of anybody, it's years. It's quite a commitment monetarily and time-wise. It's fascinating. But I was working at the time as a Spanish language court interpreter. And I'm not Hispanic, but I spoke the language fluently. I lived in different countries. And so I started to see the need, especially in the Hispanic community, for really more rapid therapy. So I switched my major and I developed this modality, for lack of a better word, where I could help adults heal from childhood trauma, which has really become my specialty. And so I shifted and I made that a degree in cross-cultural psychology.
Wow, that's
my PhD.
Incredible. The more, this is the thing about these interviews, is that the more we chat and we open up the can, we realize just how skilled the people are who we share with the My Future Business audience, and that's amazing. I mean, I've had a few guests who have been multilingual or bilingual, whatever you call it, and it just fascinates me to how you can have all of these skills and just find the time to weave it into this magic experience that you have right now in your life. So thank you for sharing that part of it.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I think it is an inherited trait. My parents were both European, and my mother spoke 7 languages. So I do. And my brother, who was adopted, had absolutely no ability with language. So I thank my parents for that, because I inherited it.
Well done. Yeah, well. I noticed that you have a couple of websites, and I'd like to, dive deep into some of these areas if we don't mind. The first is that the Dr. LJ's naturalwellness.com. Let's talk about that. And also, just as an aside for yourself, if it's okay, I'd like to share these links on our post on the My Future Business site. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, the shorter way to get to that, we have a shortcut, which is just DRLJS, Dr. LJ's, without any any punctuation. And probably by the time this airs, we're in the process of rebuilding the naturalwellnessacademy.org. It's just that we had somebody volunteer to build it out, which was very kind, but it was not exactly how we wanted to show the Academy, and we've added on so many new offerings. So that will be available probably by that time, and I'll send you, a link for that.
And absolutely, that's absolutely fine. Whatever changes need to be made, we can certainly have that arranged. And it seems as if you also are offering a free ebook there. So for our audience, definitely subscribe. I'm sure you won't be hit with any unsolicited emails, as it were. So what's in the 12 Meals ebook? I'm interested.
Well, so what happened with me is that with this autoimmune disorder, I started to become aware of the fact that there were probably deep food allergies involved. And so when my doctor told me that if I continued what was happening, I was getting shingles like every 3 or 4 months. And if you've ever had shingles, you do not want to have them every 3 or 4 months. And then one day he said to me, he says, LJ, if you're getting them so rapidly, you could wind up with permanent nerve damage, even brain damage. And that was it. Like, my brain is everything. So I started doing research, and then, going back to these Jungian roots, I love synchronicity, which are these meaningful coincidences. And so one day I was reading an article, and it said that if you had food allergies, you could knock them out by going fully raw food, which is food that's not cooked over like 115 degrees, or you can dehydrate, or you just eat, things like salads and fruits or mono meals. And that if you did this for like 90 to 120 days, you could knock out food allergies. And I thought, that is really interesting, but I know next to nothing about raw food. There was a place in Newport Beach that I used to buy these lovely little crackers from a place called Good to Go Foods. And then the next day, a friend called me from Arizona, and they had this whole integrative or functional medicine meeting, and she brought me up as a case study, and they said, get your friend on a raw food diet ASAP. And I thought, well, that's so interesting. I just read this article yesterday. I still don't really know anything about raw, but Rick, the very next day, I connected with a girl I used to box with in Newport Beach. She was a lot younger, and we used to go boxing, and we did some sparring, and most of it was on a bag, but, we would pair up. Yeah. And she was younger, and she was in college, and I hadn't spoken to her, and I was like, Melinda, tell me what's going on. She goes, LG, I just hated the corporate world. It was just eating my soul, and now I am doing what gives me passion, and I love my life. I said, well, what are you doing, hon? She says, I am a raw food chef at Good to Go Foods.
It's funny how the stars align, isn't it?
Right. Yes. And that's it. I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm a raw foodist as of the very next day. So because I'm a writer, I've written 8 books. It was like I became so healed so quickly. And my husband was like, enjoy the journey, honey. This is not really but I started making these things that he enjoyed. He started doing green smoothies. And, here's a man who still plays hockey 3 times a week in his 60s. And I know the green smoothies have contributed, and he loves the raw desserts. And when I said, I need to write about this, he said, why don't you do something really that's not so fringe? Most people could not sustain. I did it for almost 3 years, a very high raw food lifestyle, but most people couldn't sustain it. He goes, what about raw fusion? Because that's what we used to call the website, was Raw Fusion Living, and the book is called that. And so we give you an ebook, and these are the idea. The idea is to get more living foods into your diet, because the living foods, food that hasn't been, overprocessed or overcooked, overheated, those foods lose a lot of their nutrients. And already our foods are so lacking in nutrients. Our soil is deprived. There's so many toxins. There's GMOs. And so if you get food that is beaming and bursting with, or brimming, I guess is the word, with the micronutrients, you automatically start to heal your body. So I started taking that point of view and teaching people about this way of eating. And then I entered kind of a whole new phase of life.
You seem fairly self-aware, self-confident. Is this how you've always been? I just get this radiance from you. I mean, early on in the days when you're challenged with the things you were talking about early, did you go through? And I think coming back to try and tie it into the business realm somewhat, I think there's a lot to be said about self-awareness and self-belief. Do you talk about that in any of your books?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even my courses always have that holistic piece to them. Like my students who are in the holistic health and life coaching certification, they first go through body, then they learn mind, then they learn spirit, and then they learn the coaching dynamics, and they do a final project. So spirit is just as important. I mean, my favorite saying in the world was I think he was a monk, and Teilhard de Chardin, and he was a Jesuit monk, and he said, we're not just physical beings happen to be having a spiritual experience. We are spirits that happen to be having a physical experience. And so the more I've come full circle to understand that and to be in touch with who I am, that has built more self-confidence. But it's an ongoing job, Rick. I mean,
every day that you live on this earth, you are faced with different things, aren't you? Different challenges and different opportunities, and I guess we have a shift every 24 hours in our awareness. I noticed. Can I just touch on your books here? I'm looking through the list of your books. How many have you got? There's the Raw Fusion Living, S Cleaner, Your Mind, and I'm sure there are others. Positive Habits. Wow, you're a prolific writer.
Well, not really. I mean, I think if I were prolific, I'd be knocking out one a year, because that book, The Raw Fusion Living, which I put out originally in 2010, I mean, this book started out with being over 400 pages. Then we decided to pare back on another edition. But that one took me only 3.5 months to write. And when I really buckle down and I write, I can get it out. But I have to be honest, it's that showing up at the page, to do it. I've just been asked to write for Dr. Mercola, which is the #1 health website here in the United States. And they've used recipes of mine, and they like my idea about the mind body. So I'm working I should be working. I'm incubating, let's say, an article for them as an audition article. So I procrastinate. This is just a journey. We're all on this journey, and I don't, maybe I've just been on it a little bit longer, but I'm still dealing,
I can tell you though, for others who are struggling to write a book, it's certainly impressive, because I'm thinking that people who do struggle to write books could certainly learn a bit and take a leaf out of your book just to get things done.
Well, sometimes, lately, and I know we were going to touch on this, lately I've actually started working with authors or speakers or people who want to be authors and coaches and small business owners or individuals who have this kind of niche expertise. And I do online courses because that's always been kind of a model for me, is teaching and mentoring. So in the course of that, I work with people who want to write a book, and sometimes it's easier to start with a course because a course is really your bare bones of a book. It doesn't require as much investment in terms of time and really fleshing all of that out. And so sometimes I work with people that we do a course and then they already have that outline now. They could fill it in and have their book. Or we take somebody who has a book and it's not doing much, so we repurpose it into a course or with other materials that they've written.
Wow. So, this seems to be something that you teach who is your audience, I guess is my question.
Well, the type of course could be for different audiences. If you have a niche expertise in something, let's say like all about running podcasts and booking guests, and for people, let's say, who would want to perhaps do this, you could create a course about this, and that would be like a niche consumer. those
So,
consumers who want to learn about that. Can you hear me?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, okay. And so, or you can have a course like when I realized that with my new background in holistic health and my old background in the mind and understanding that to change a person's eating habits, it's just not through an act of will. You have to know how to help them make those subconscious changes. So I decided to combine the two, and I created that certification course to become a coach. So there's professional courses, what are called CEUs, continuing education, and there are courses that are mastery. Let's say you have a product that's very informationally intensive. You might not monetize in the moment somebody taking your course, but you gain goodwill, you gain people understanding how your service or product works in a very fun, up-to-date, engaging way, because really online education has become kind of the thing.
Yeah.
Jumping from 48 billion in 2015 in January to 115 billion by the end of that year, and probably up over 150 billion right now.
Certainly come a long way in a very short space of time. There's no doubt in that. Do you, is this all text-based? Is it video-based? Is there a membership site behind these things, or how do you do it?
Well, there's different ways of doing it. You can have a plugin that is incorporated into your own website, and that's so easy to do. There's third-party learning management systems, LMS. We're actually building one that is specific to his style. And when I say style, I really am a firm believer, because of my background in the mind, and of course with hypnotherapy, you wind up studying also neuro-linguistic programming, which says that we're not all learning through the same learning channel. So, for instance, I'm very visual, but I prefer text, or I prefer memes, or I prefer something visual that I can look at like an infographic to video, but some people really love those videos. And you have to know how to have a combination to hit the auditory. We have this kind of engaging type of thing we call clickability. There's animation, there's gamification. So you're hitting a wide range when you're dealing with people. So you want to have courses that are multidimensional and multimedia.
When you're developing your programs, do you talk about how to sell these things as well as how to make them?
Well, I even have a webinar series I'm going to do the last piece on just coming up early next month, and that is on launching and marketing. Marketing perhaps is not my strongest area, but we will share, as part of our whole mentoring. Like, we do anything from consulting to branding to coming up with the concept, the curriculum, all the way. I've had to write courses for people because they're not writers. And then, of course, I am not technical, but I have technical staff that does all the design aspects, and then the uploading and testing the platform and making sure that it works. Because with an online course, you can virtually wake up in the morning and find money, in your Stripe account or PayPal account. So it's, you definitely, you want to work with somebody to find out not just one course that they could offer, but I very often speak to people and they don't even realize the trajectory of courses that they could. And you want to work kind of in a funnel system, because as I started doing the program, when somebody really likes you, it's just like you have people that listen to your podcast and they want to tune into you every, as often as you have them, or download them to catch up on your show. When you have fans, people want more of you. So when you have, and I'm not belittling, because a book is a wonderful credential, but there's not a huge ROI. You don't get a big return on investment. I just wrote an article about this for LinkedIn, and you get a better return of investment, but you also turn people from fans into followers, into proteges, people who will pay eventually to follow in your footsteps, so you can have a training the trainer. So I work with people kind of to show them that whole trajectory, and we'll start with the first course, the one that makes the most sense. So it's fun because it's almost like a form of therapy. It's a form of teaching, mentoring, and I've done some things in between that part of my career, and they were never successful for me, or let's say they were never satisfying because they were out of that wheelhouse of the mentoring, the teaching.
Yeah, I just touching on something you said just moments ago about this having your team take care of some of the moving parts, whatever they might be. It's obvious to me through just the volume of great content that you have on your websites that you're not doing this yourself. Tell us a little bit about how you go about that side of your business.
Well, there's another site. It's just designmycourse.com. And I have this absolutely brilliant girl who has become a goddaughter.
Sorry, I love that.
Yeah.
Domains are everything.
Right. But so this girl, she's just absolutely brilliant. She's one of these Renaissance women who can do just about everything. I mean, she did the page making in the Raw Fusion book. She did these wonderful graphics. And so she always is trying to teach herself new things. So she's even created, like if you go to Design My Course, you can take a sample and look at what we call it clickability. It's like when you click on things and it gives you answers. And kinesthetic, who are more sense-oriented learners, really enjoy that. So she's a really good conceptual person for the back end of that, and we work well together. But we also have people that do some of the coding or do some animation. We have to farm out some of the work. And even though I can come up with a great storyboard, I do not have the skills to do any of the technical work, although certain types of the LMS, I know how to use them, because we have one ourselves, and I've trained people who we've built courses for who have the same LMS. I can teach them that, but it's a nice synergy of working together.
I mean, the thing about all of this part of the conversation, LJ, is that we as business owners and leaders could easily have fallen into the trap of the technician role. Robert Kiyosaki talks about the 4 quadrants of business, and you can either be a technician, a business owner, an investor. I think I know there's one other, and you seem to me to have a very good grip on. And I'm looking at your designmycourse.com site now. A very good grip on how to make this all come together without burying yourself in work. How important is it for you to get some downtime, to get away from all these things?
I have a lot of downtime. I just wanted to go back to what you said because it was another synchronicity. My husband was actually the writer and the producer of the Kiyosaki infomercial that was done here in the United States. So, so he had a chance to actually work with him. But I have a lot of downtime because I'm really more of a creative force than everything. And I think that so much of that work, I mean, it sounds silly, but I could be taking a nice long soak bath and I will have just lots of information flow. And sometimes I just have to take a break and do what I like to do, reading something that's fun for me. Right now I have a big caseload. We just added on a new program, a gut health specialist and a mind and metabolism, because we're finding out so much about the mind in the gut, the second mind, the microbiome. So we started a new course. So we've got a lot of new students, and I've got a lot of new clients for Design My Course. So a little less downtime, but I'm not complaining. No. I love what I do.
Oh, look, as we speak, I really just have to invite you back at some stage.
I would love it.
Yeah, look, and also when you hop on the big bird and fly over the pond and come see us in South Australia, in Australia, we'd love to have you here.
Well, it's been very interesting because this new element to the Natural Wellness Academy that was put together by one of my graduates. So it's cool because the Natural Wellness Academy is now bearing fruit. We're developing strategic relationships even with our graduates. One of them wrote this book called Buddha Belly, and she's just this brilliant young 32-year-old, and came up with this gut certification program that we're sponsoring and that I helped her write. And she's doing an enormous amount of business in Australia. I would love to connect you with Brittany. Yeah. And so it's she just told me the other day, she says, I think we're going to be going to Australia. And so I was like, well, sweetie, maybe it's going to become like your Japan, So I'm thrilled for her because I love to see, again, that mentoring piece. I want to share this model with I know your show is for business owners. There is that model. I've got to say, passive income is a really wonderful thing, and that's why I'm passionate about doing the online and showing people to do it. When we started looking into it, we found that there was really nobody offering the service at an affordable price to the small business owner who doesn't have $10,000 to invest like these, or $20,000 like these Fortune 500 companies or universities doing online programs. So we make it very affordable, or we teach people how to do it through our webinars.
Well, look, any connections that we can make is part of our whole goal is to help build better, more profitable and sustainable businesses. So very, very happy to connect with any of your colleagues and help them out wherever we can. In fact, even invite them onto the show might be an option.
I would love that. And I think you would really like speaking to Brittany because she's such a fresh, young millennial voice and really understands the whole mind, body, spirit piece.
Look, it's already been a half an hour, and as is the case with pretty much all of our interviews, we quickly click away the time, and we could easily spend another couple of hours talking about particular things with you. But where can people find you? You want to run through the best way to get involved with you?
Yes, I think the best way right now is through the drljs.com. And even though there's information about the Natural Wellness Academy on there, it will just click to the new site anyway, you know, if somebody clicks on the information to become a coach. But there's so much material on this website, lots of we call recipes for body, mind, and spirit. So you'll find all kinds of information. I have a Dr. LJ Rose site that's more of the hypnotherapy persona, but I don't know how to update that website, so it really hasn't been updated in years. And then if somebody's interested in perhaps connecting with me about maybe exploring, it's always a free exploratory call. Design my course. Go on there, fill out a little form, and we'll figure out how to connect either by phone or Skype.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I'm looking at that now, and this will be put up on YouTube as a podcast call. It will be syndicated through iTunes. If you enjoy what you are hearing on this call, make sure to leave a comment below, subscribe to our channel, and reach out to LJ and have this conversation. She's a wonderful spirit. She has a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and I'm sure she'll be more than happy to hear from you. LJ, it's been fantastic. I definitely will speak with you offline and invite you back to the My Future Business show.
Well, thank you. I really loved your style of interviewing, so I appreciate this very much, Rick, and thanks to all of your listeners for listening.